I never imagined a bright, ordinary Saturday morning could unravel into such chaos. Yet that's exactly what happened the day I realized my truck had vanished. Not just misplaced, stolen, right out of my own garage. You'd think a locked garage in a quiet neighborhood would be enough protection, but apparently not, especially when you're dealing with the kind of entitlement only a Karen could pass down to her kid. There I was, sipping my coffee and scrolling through my phone when, later on, I'd discover through my security footage that my neighbor's teenage son had strutted into my driveway like he owned the place. No hesitation, no nerves, just that smug smirk of someone who thought the world owed him everything. And then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, he opened my garage door, slid behind the wheel of my truck, and drove off. The sheer audacity was enough to make my blood pressure spike. But the insanity didn't stop there. When I confronted him later, he had the nerve to claim that the HOA had approved it. You heard me right. According to him, the Homeowners Association had nothing better to do than give teenagers permission to break into garages and borrow vehicles. The lie was so bold I almost laughed. My neighborhood wasn't perfect, but this was on another level. I called the HOA immediately, demanding answers. Their shock matched mine. Nobody had signed off on anything. The kid, clearly emboldened by years of his mother's interference and inflated ego, had spun this story out of thin air as if it were fact. And then came the line that nearly sent me over the edge. When I threatened legal action, he shrugged and said, "Mom said you'd just let me take it." That was the moment I knew I wasn't just facing some dumb teen stunt. I was dealing with years of unchecked arrogance, cultivated by the queen of entitlement herself. My disbelief quickly hardened into determination. If I didn't act fast, I might never see my truck again. So I called the police, filed a formal report, and gathered every shred of proof I could. Security footage, timestamps, even neighbor statements, it all went into a neat little file. Because when someone thinks they're untouchable, the best weapon you have is documentation. Still, I had no idea then how far this whole mess would spiral. A simple theft was about to explode into HOA drama, lies, and legal battles that no one on the block had ever witnessed before. And the consequences for Karen's son. Far worse than he ever expected. Felonies, courtrooms, and a reality check in accountability. Even so, the adrenaline hadn't worn off. The moment I discovered my truck gone, it had felt like a punch to the gut. And as word spread through the neighborhood, people started whispering about the brazenness of it all. But I wasn't about to let it slide. This wasn't some teenager making a mistake. This was entitlement in its rawest form. And this kid was Karen's son through and through. Fueled by his bogus HOA claim, I walked straight over to their house to confront them face to face. Standing in their driveway, my anger simmered under the surface, but I kept my voice steady. I told Karen point blank that her son had broken into my garage and stolen my truck. And do you know what she did? She laughed. Actually laughed as if the whole ordeal was a harmless joke. "He's just borrowing it," she said, like laws and basic decency didn't apply to her family. I forced myself to stay calm. Losing it would only give her more power. When I mentioned her son's ridiculous HOA excuse, her smirk only widened. "He told me they approved it," she said dismissively. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the official HOA response, an email flatly denying any such approval. For the first time, her mask slipped. Just for a second, but it was enough. She knew I had her cornered, but standing there arguing wasn't going to fix anything. I had to take this higher. So I showed up at the next HOA board meeting with my evidence in hand. Watching her son squirm as the footage played on the big screen was oddly satisfying. The board confirmed in no uncertain terms that no permission had ever been granted. The kid's story was completely fabricated, and now it had legal weight. From there, I moved back to law enforcement. Filing the police report was simple enough, but recovering the stolen truck took persistence. Each conversation with officers reminded me how serious this case was: breaking and entering, grand theft auto, and possible felonies. What started as a bratty stunt had escalated into criminal charges. By the end of the week, the police had officially contacted the Karen household. And just like that, the cocky grin faded from her son's face. For the first time, he looked like he understood that real consequences were on the horizon. Finally, I saw a glimmer of justice. But things weren't slowing down. The days ahead would only crank up the tension, turning this from a story about a stolen truck into something much bigger. This wasn't just about theft anymore. It was about entitlement, accountability, and the painful lessons waiting for those who thought they could live above the law. The shift was obvious. After the police confirmed the theft, the entire aura around the Karen household changed. The smug confidence that had once let her son stroll into my garage without fear evaporated almost overnight. Suddenly, law enforcement wasn't just a distant threat. It was calling their phone every other day. Felony charges loomed like thunderclouds. Just a week earlier, this kid had acted like he owned the block. Now he was staring down the justice system for the first time in his life. And then came the day the police pulled up to their door. You could almost feel the tension radiating from their house. I stayed a safe distance away, knowing full well that justice has its own rhythm. Her son tried to act casual, shrugging and pretending like he didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. But the officers weren't fooled. They laid it out for him in plain, heavy words, breaking and entering auto theft and the looming threat of felony convictions. Each charge hit him like a hammer, chipping away at the arrogance he had carried for so long. While they dealt with him, my focus shifted back to one thing: my truck. The officers urged patience, explaining that the vehicle would be returned once the investigation had wrapped. In the meantime, I went back through the security footage, documenting every detail of that night. I collected copies of HOA correspondence, timestamps, and even statements from neighbors who had seen him walking into my driveway. Every shred of evidence tightened the case against him, every page exposing just how deep his entitled mindset ran. By midweek, the Karen household no longer looked the same. Friends and neighbors noticed it too. The sharp edge in her voice was gone, replaced with careful words and guarded behavior. The once cocky teen who strutted around with smug confidence now kept his eyes down, speaking little. The weight of reality had finally begun to crush them both. The lesson was brutal, but it was exactly what they needed. You can't invent authority, you can't fake permission, and you can't dodge the law with arrogance. But even with that initial confrontation behind us, the storm wasn't over. The legal process was only beginning. Court dates, hearings, fines, they were all on the horizon. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and caution. Justice was finally moving forward, but I knew battles with entitlement rarely ended cleanly. And in my quiet moments, a bigger truth sank in. This wasn't just about a stolen truck anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, about proving that no matter who you are or who your mother is, you're not above the law. Soon enough, the entire neighborhood began treating it as a cautionary tale. Karen's son, once the untouchable golden boy, was now the poster child for arrogance gone wrong. Everyone whispered about the upcoming trial, the potential felonies, and the irony of it all. The day of the hearing arrived, and the atmosphere in that courtroom was thick. I sat and watched him fidget nervously in the defendant's chair while his mother leaned over, whispering desperate instructions. The judge didn't waste time. Piece by piece, the evidence was laid out. Video of him opening my garage, timestamps mapping the exact timeline, emails from the HOA denying any approval, and witness statements from the neighbors. It all painted the same undeniable picture. He had acted knowingly, willingly, and arrogantly. When the judge finally spoke, his words cut like steel. "You don't get to decide what belongs to you and what doesn't," he said firmly. "Actions have consequences, and in this courtroom, those consequences are serious." I could feel the weight of those words filling the room. No more excuses, no hiding behind false HOA claims, no protection from an overbearing mother. This was accountability in its purest form. By the time the hearing ended, the decision was clear. The teenager would face probation, mandatory community service, and a warning that jail time would follow if he failed to comply. The felony charges would remain on his record, a permanent scar from a single act of arrogance. His mother, who once laughed off the entire situation, now sat silently, realizing there was nothing left to shield him. For me, the chapter closed the day I drove my truck out of the impound lot. Relief washed over me, but so did a deep sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about a vehicle anymore. It was about proving that entitlement and deception won't go unchecked. The neighborhood had witnessed something unforgettable, a raw lesson in accountability that would echo for years to come. In the end, Karen's son sneaking into my garage became more than just a theft story. It turned into a parable about arrogance, privilege, and the price you pay when you think you're untouchable. Justice wasn't just served. It was delivered with a lasting reminder. Integrity matters. Accountability matters. And no amount of smug entitlement can erase the consequences of your actions. As I drove home, the engine humming steady beneath me, I couldn't help but think. Some lessons hurt. But those are the ones that stick forever. And if you enjoyed this wild ride and want more outrageous HOA and Karen stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Don't forget to drop a like and share in the comments what you would have done in my place. Your thoughts just might show up in the next video.